Previously on Centre Stage.
Aafia's dragged out of the car herself and put in another car. She's the only person we have a detailed history of who was put through the whole rendition to torture program by the Americans who was a woman.
But the terrorism charges were never actually brought against her.
She's never been charged with anything.
In part one of this conversation, civil rights lawyer Clive Stafford Smith recounts how the events following the September 11 attacks on the US and the so-called War on Terror eventually led him to take on the shocking case of Aafia Siddiqui. In part two, Stafford Smith resumes the story of Aafia Siddiqui, the American Pakistani woman serving an 86-year prison sentence, a victim, he says, of the United States' global war on terror.
Now we go to 2008. She is a ghost prisoner, but suddenly she is released.
This happened to so many people. Now, normally they would just be released some way. But ironically, the massive problem for Aafia was her brilliant sister, Fauzia. Fauzia, deeply concerned about where her sister and her two nephews and niece were, had created such a movement in Pakistan. Fauzia had 1 million people march on this.
So many people around the world have not heard of Aafia Siddiqui, but she is the most famous woman in Pakistan.
In Pakistan, absolutely. I think you've got Imran Khan is the most famous man, and Aafia Siddiqui is the most famous.
And of course,
woman.
she is being held in the United States, so it could be a point of tension between Pakistan and America now.
In a way, you're totally right. You put your finger on it. This is the greatest dissonance that I've ever experienced between the public opinion in Pakistan, where everyone knows, and America, where no one knows.
What happens to her in Ghazni? This is where it's absolutely bizarre, and there is someone that then comes to her rescue. They move her from Bagram to Ghazni province in Afghanistan.
Well, I think she'd already been moved to Kabul.
Right.
To this women's prison in Kabul. And now, I genuinely don't believe in conspiracy theories. 99% of the time, it's just some person doing something stupid. It's not a conspiracy. This is a conspiracy. And I'm convinced of it. And it has the ISI's fingerprints all over it. It's a Pakistani thing. So what happens is she's let go from where she's being held, and she's told that if she goes to Ghazni, she can have Mariam back and they can all go back to Pakistan. She's given this boy, whose name's Ihsan Ali, who is actually her son, Ahmed, but he's 5 years older. He's deeply traumatized and doesn't admit to his own mum that he's Ahmed. She's deeply traumatized and is not sure if he is. But they're put on this bus, and one thing I've only recently discovered is on this bus was someone who is obviously Pakistani. I got a photograph of the guy.
This is a very important element. Is it a discovery you've made recently that could be very important in this case?
You've got two hypotheses. One is that they're being true to their word and she's actually being released and she can go get Mariam and go back to Pakistan.
That's what she thinks.
That's what she
is
thinks.
Going to happen.
That is total nonsense, it turns out. On the other hand, the second theory is that people need to get rid of her because she's such a political liability. I'm convinced of it already from everything I've learned, is that, and it has the Pakistani fingerprints all over it, that she was going to go to Ghazni on this bus. She was going to be tarred as a suicide bomber and she was going to be killed there. And the indicators of that is, first, on the bus is her son Ihsan Ali / Ahmed. It's July, hot summer in Afghanistan. He's got a coat on with 4 big pockets with bits of fruit in it, clearly meant to look like he's a suicide bomber. She's got a full chador on. You can't see what's underneath it. And she's told to go sit outside this mosque for Mariam to be delivered to her. That's never going to happen. So she goes to the mosque in Ghazni. She's sitting there, and someone calls in a suicide bomber warning, and the Afghan National Police show up, 50 of them with their AK-47s. They do what they do when there's a suicide bomb thing. They're 100 feet away surrounding her. She doesn't speak Farsi. They don't speak Urdu. They would have just shot her. And then what would have happened is the headline, evil al-Qaeda woman suicide bomber even
So she's
has
dumped outside this mosque.
Right.
Someone puts in a call to the Afghans or the Americans,
The Afghans.
saying she is about to plant a bomb in this place, and so they surround her, and the idea is that probably she would be killed.
Exactly, and
Because
there's
she's a
only
threat.
one reason that didn't happen. And this is, I went to Ghazni on a cold winter day in November, and I found this guy, Mohammed Ajmal Mohammadi. He was a tailor who was across the street from the Khalid bin Walid Mosque. And he saw this woman out there, and there were people trying to talk to her. She didn't speak Farsi, so they couldn't talk. So in the end, he goes out there as it's getting dark, and he says, this is a war zone. It's 2008 in Ghazni. You can't stay here. My aunt lives around the corner. Why don't you go stay there for the night? She's saying, no, I'm waiting for, they're talking Urdu. And she's saying, no, I'm waiting for someone to be delivered to me. And at that moment, that's when the police show up with all their guns. So Mohammadi, when they start pointing guns and saying they're going to shoot her, and they're all screaming in Farsi, and she's terrified, and Mohammadi stands between her and the guns and says she's not a suicide bomber. And they get furious with him. But then one of them goes up and rips off her chador, and sure enough, she's not wearing a suicide vest. Mohammadi is incredibly offended that they pulled her chador off. So he puts it back on her. Then they rip it off her again. He's really angry at this point. And so they drag him off, but then they can't kill her. Because by this time, lots of people are watching, and they all know that they're not a suicide bomber.
And now what do they do with her?
So now what happens is she's taken to the Afghan National Police headquarters, and they're talking to her. And, now the Afghans, they weren't in on this plot, right? They were just being used. And the Afghans are now talking to this woman. She's not a suicide bomber. She says she's just waiting to take her kids home to Pakistan. They say, fine. But then the FBI hears that Aafia Siddiqui has been detained in Ghazni. And so they're all excited because they haven't known where she's been for the last 5 years. They think she's an Al-Qaeda person on the run. So they come swooping into Ghazni to come and arrest her. So at any rate, they all come into town. Meanwhile, Aafia is in the ANP headquarters. She's on a bed behind a curtain in a room. Now, at that point, the Americans come in because they want to interrogate her, but she doesn't know about this. But she hears American voices. And what she says is, I heard American voices. I'm terrified I'm going back to more torture. So I peek around the curtain, and one of the soldiers says, she's on the loose, and shoots her twice in the stomach.
And this is where the events happen, which the charges that she has been convicted on, this moment now is why she has been in prison for 86
Right.
years.
Now, I'll tell you what the Americans say. The Americans say that they came into that room not knowing she was behind the curtain, and they were just having a nice chat with their Afghan counterparts. One of the American soldiers allegedly puts his M4 submachine gun on the ground.
He left it just like that.
It would just never happen.
The rifle is unattended on the ground, and
allegedly Aafia grabs the gun, flips the safety catch off. She starts shooting at the Americans. She doesn't hit them, but the heroic American pulls his pistol and shoots her. And as part of the trial evidence, they show these two holes in the top of the wall, and say, that's where the bullets must have gone that she fired. Few small flaws with their theory, which is that there was earlier that day a press conference in that very same room, which we have the video of, and those two holes were in the wall there before all of this allegedly happened. So clearly that's not true. They tested her for gunshot residue. There's no gunshot residue on her. There are no shell casings from an M4. There's no bullets from an M4. Honestly, it didn't happen. But, you've got to understand where they're coming from. If they shot an unarmed woman in that room, there'd been a number of trials in Afghanistan where soldiers had been put on trial for using force like that and prosecuted criminally.
so they're protecting
They protect each other.
their soldiers. But so in the meantime, you have Aafia, who is traumatized. She's already spent 5 years in prison where she has been tortured. She is missing the psychological pain of not having her children. So she was the one that was shot, and now they have to explain this. And so the trial takes place for attempted
First,
murder.
they take her back to Bagram, everything that she feared. But they take her, to give them credit, they take her to hospital. And she comes very close to death, but doesn't. At that point, they then, 2 weeks later, fly her to New York to put her on trial. And unfortunately...
2008 now.
We're now 2008, July the 18th, 2008, this happened. August the 4th, she goes to America. Your problem, from a defense perspective, is there's a war in Afghanistan. And so there are no witnesses who come to the trial who are not the witnesses the American government brought. And as a result, she really just doesn't have a prayer. I was the first American who got to go do a full investigation.
What happens to her now?
So she goes through this whole thing. No one believes her when she says she was in American custody for 5 years. And actually it's interesting. The defense tries to get a hold of the CIA records, and the CIA just lies and says we don't have any. So she's convicted and she's sent to FMC Carswell. But when she's being sentenced by Judge Berman, he's been told all this stuff about how she's a terrorist and this, that, and the other. So he gives her a big enhancement. And under the sentencing regime, they can use stuff against you that you've not been charged with. So the judge goes through all the stuff that has been said about her and enhances it. And I'm not really blaming the judge. This is what he'd been told at the time. But it's all nonsense. And I've written so far 26,000 words about everything that the judge had wrong. And so he enhances it from, say, 10 to 15 years to 86 years, which means she dies in prison.
Maybe we could touch on the institution where Aafia is being held, FMC Carswell, meaning it's a federal medical center, but it's really a prison. Tell us what it's like inside this place.
I was genuinely horrified when I went there. I've been to most of the maximum security prisons in America. I've been to Guantanamo 42 times. I thought I'd seen it all. But I went to FMC Carswell and...
It's worse than Guantanamo.
Oh, it's way worse than Guantanamo. In Guantanamo, I get contact visits with my clients. I can sit there and eat food with them. And, they trust me. I'm not going to spring someone out of prison. I'm there to represent them. In Carswell, getting in there is hard enough. I am wearing, just in honor of coming on your program, the very jeans that I had to buy because they wouldn't let me in the prison because I was wearing khaki trousers.
Why were you... But they prefer jeans. So
No, the women prisoners have khaki uniforms, and somehow I was meant to take my trousers off and give them to, I don't know what it's about. But it's very hard to set things up in Carswell. And the prison has a shocking reputation of rape in the last few years, rape of the female prisoners. One of them was a Christian minister, for goodness sake. And so what's going on there? Aafia told me on the very first visit about all the abuse that was going on. She alleges she's been raped twice herself, that she's subjected to all sorts of sexual misconduct. And then, there are other things. The strip searching is bad enough for her.
So there are broader issues with the practices and the abuse that takes place inside this facility that applies to all the women there, not just Aafia.
Yeah, but I think a lot more applies to Aafia because I've got 1,089 pages of her medical records there, and nowhere do they accept that she's been tortured. There is no mention that her children were taken and kidnapped, and they think all of this is some fantasy of hers that she made up. And everything she does as a result of this incredible trauma that she's gone through, they put down to her just being a bad person, whereas in fact, she is the victim of all victims. So she's getting no real medical care. She's had her teeth knocked out of her mouth. She's deaf in her right ear where they hit her enough times. And I've been trying to get independent doctors in to see her, female Muslim women doctors, which is what we need. And they won't let them in. She's in solitary confinement, effectively in admin segregation. She's been there every day for the last 14 years. That's more than any of the other women in federal prison. 10,250. She's been treated worse than any of them. When I went there, I was just so horrified. For now, it's become a crusade for me. And we're going to close that place down if it's the last thing I do. because Aafia is the victim of all victims, but there's a lot of other victims of a dreadful institution.
In terms of Aafia now, what is the best case scenario for her? Because this is a woman who's been through a great deal. She's been convicted. She's stuck in this terrible institution. She's been tortured, physically abused, sexually abused. What are the prospects for her release?
She clearly suffers from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because she's been tortured. Now, the one thing, I'd never really thought about it until I was in Guantanamo. You can't get therapy from the people who are torturing you. And so she's getting no care for this incredible trauma that she's gone through. And there's only one place she can get that from, and that's from a loving environment with her family. So she's got to get back to her family.
How is that going to be managed, though, and psychologically to go to the country where all this began, the government in a country she may feel has deeply betrayed her?
Well, and they have deeply betrayed her, and this is a big problem.
Does this go some way to explaining why, despite multiple diplomatic efforts and actually relationship between the governments of Pakistan and the United States, nothing has been done for Aafia Siddiqui, because there are those elements inside Pakistan that don't want her released because then it could implicate them?
I mean, if you think about what happened in 2008, Musharraf was still in power then, and so this whole effort to kill Aafia was by the very people who had originated the whole thing. There are still people who are afraid of that. Now, to them I tell them, you got two choices. You either do the right thing and do the decent thing. We're not interested in making movies in Aafia when she gets out. This woman needs real care and love. But, if the people who are behind this stuff don't get out of the way, then, I've got no option except to expose them. And I know who some of them are. And I haven't named them in public. And I'm not going to if they get out of the way, but I will if they don't. But I think we have to explore alternatives. We really, really need help. The Afghans would take her in an instant. But the Americans are probably going to be a bit loath to do business with the people they just lost a war against. But, we got to find some way.
So this wouldn't be the legal route. It would be a political, diplomatic negotiation to remove her from this facility.
There's politics and law. I mean, I'm going to file this thing in New York that's basically challenging her conviction and her sentence, but also seeking compassionate release. So the judge could order her release. Now, if the judge does that, she's got to go somewhere. And there are all sorts of different possibilities that we could sort out, including swapping her for Shakil Afridi, who the Pakistanis have, who helped the Americans kill bin Laden.
So there are officials looking at these options now in Pakistan and Washington, is that right?
Well, I'm trying to make them look at them. And, look, Representative Sherman from California is obsessed with Shakil Afridi coming back to America, or coming to America. And so we have political support, but this is not an easy thing to solve.
Do you think she can survive much longer in that facility, which you've said is worse than Guantanamo Bay? She's already been through so much. Conditions, psychological, physical, emotional.
There's survival and survival, right? She's a very strong-willed person. Her biggest issue, I think, at some level, has been thinking that she was forgotten and abandoned. And one project I've had is to get people to write letters to her through me, because then I can send them in to her as legal mail, and she can read about the people who care about her. And I think that's really important. It's really important to get her sister back in there so that she has human contact and so forth.
Why is it so difficult to get justice in America?
We love to hate people, and it's the Ku Klux Klan did it with black people. We do it with Muslims and people we call criminals. And it's a very sad element of human nature. And then we set up rules that make it very difficult for someone in prison to get justice. We lost our way post 9/11. I hope to goodness we're going to find it again.
Clive Stafford Smith, thank you for joining us on Centre Stage.
It's really been a pleasure. Thank you. you.